I've got to try and get through a lot of stuff in these 15 minutes. What I'm trying to do is to explore the relationship between building a sustainable economy and a debt-based money system. That's obviously a vast topic, so I'm just going to try and offer some hints towards that. And when I say being in the red, I am thinking about our ecological debt as well as our financial debt. So here's the five topics, even less time, that I want to cover. I want to think a little bit about this slogan of jobs and growth and what we actually mean by that, because very often I think that's an entirely quantity-based slogan. It has nothing to do with quality, and that's quite important. I'm briefly going to touch on physical limits to growth. I mean, Tim covered that, so I don't need to go into that. I'm going to think about what that growth has actually achieved for us, and then I'm going to think about why we've got into this place of austerity and how that's actually holding us back from addressing a lot of the topics in terms of equality and sustainability that are a political priority right now. And then briefly talk about green investment. Okay, so I've just recently been elected to the European Parliament, so I have to sit through, I'm on the Economics Committee, I have to sit through a lot of neoliberal clones sort of coming in and repeating these mantras there. It's really extraordinary how off track they are. I think in the last meeting I tweeted, for people who totally messed up the global economy, these guys are very confident, or something like that. That's what you get, you know, and one of the key sort of slogans we've got is the one around jobs and growth, as if this was one kind of thing that we all decide that we want, a sort of undifferentiated mass of jobs and growth. And I think what's impressed me most about the other side, from my side, is the skillful way that they've used the financial crisis to advance their political agenda. I think that actually the forces of reaction and the owners of capital have used the financial crisis to attack the conditions of employment and wage levels in a skillful but obviously entirely reprehensible way. The main slogan that we get, other than jobs and growth, is structural reform. This is never specified what this means, but what this means is attacking the standards for workers, privatisation of state assets. It's a whole agenda that when countries get into economic difficulties, the sort of controllers of the European economic project force these policies on them. The other thing that's offered is monetary stimulus. Juncker is currently offering 300 billion of monetary stimulus across the European Union. Nobody knows where that money's going to come from, and that's actually quite an interesting question in terms of the whole issue of green QE. But he is now, again, basically the US and the UK have only got out of the recession at all through massive monetary stimulus, and that hasn't been possible in the European Union, which is why we don't see a return to growth there. But the proposal is now that they will start throwing money at the problem in a similar kind of way. And lastly, just to show you the sort of paucity of thinking at the European Union level, we have Juncker saying that one of his key aims is this digital single market for consumers and businesses, as if it's something to do with the technique of how you buy and sell stuff that's actually the problem. You know, they're not thinking at a fundamental level at all. And I find that slightly disturbing, because as you move up through the political echelons, you think you sort of get closer to somewhere where people understand what's going on and have a solution, even if it's the wrong one. But I found the reverse to be the case. The further up you move, the more you realise people are just completely ill-informed about how things work and have no proposals for changing them. I mean, it's kind of reassuring, because it means we're not as crazy as we thought we were, but also rather disturbing. So here's what growth actually looked like. If growth looked like that, and we're living within a finite planet, perhaps a break from growth isn't such a bad thing, I'm suggesting. But the key point is, if we're going to embrace the end of growth, we need to do that by using the end of growth to move towards an economy that is based around sustainability and equity. And I think we can do that. I think we have to use this opportunity. We need to grasp it back from the owners of capital and the global elites, and we have to use the crisis we're in to shift the way people think about the economy. Just a couple of points about the ecological impact of the way we live now. There's been a lot of crowing almost from the government about how we've managed to reduce our carbon dioxide emissions. But as this graph shows, we've largely done that through offshoring production, because the carbon dioxide emissions we count in our totals are the ones that are produced by manufacturing and economic activity here in the UK. So if you're a multinational, the quickest way to reduce your carbon footprint is actually to move your production offshore, and then those totals will no longer be counted in our totals. So you can see here, the dark blue is carbon dioxide produced by goods made in the UK. You can see that has slightly come down, but that's made up for and more by the carbon dioxide produced in goods made overseas. So we are consuming more, we are producing more carbon dioxide. It's just that rather than that stuff being made here, it's now being made in China. What did that growth do for us in terms of our happiness? This is what economists call the Easterlin paradox, and it's a graph showing the relationship between, what does SWB? Social welfare benefits? No. Anyway, it's showing how happy, subjective well-being, that's it. It's comparing people's happiness with GDP per capita. And what it shows you is that once you reach a certain level of wealth, a little bit more wealth doesn't make you very much happier. I think that's rather obvious. I think we can all observe that in our own lives. As you earn more, there's a point at which you're kind of desperately poor and worrying and having to shop in Lidl, which isn't very nice. Then you get to a point where you're fairly comfortable. Beyond that, extra income doesn't really improve your well-being very much. And that seems to be true on a national and a global basis. Although if you look at this a bit more carefully, there are obviously some countries that are just massive grumblers, and others, other parts of the world where people are basically quite cheerful. But anyway, leaving that aside, I think it's also important to note that the fact that this is called a paradox tells you a lot about the sort of basic assumptions of economic theory. In other words, the one that tells you that people are materially inclined. And I think most of us in this room know that actually we're not. It isn't material stuff that brings us happiness. Can't buy love, as the Beatles so rightly said. Again, I haven't really got time to go into this. It's quite difficult actually to argue with an economist about the fact that you can't have exponential growth within a limited planet, because it's like an article of faith for them that you can. So I think it's like one of those essential truths you can't argue about, but I don't really see much point in going down that argument, because to me it's just self-evident that if there are physical limits, the economy cannot grow within those physical limits forever. There is a barrier there. I'm just going to cover one graph that gives a bit of detail about the reductions in carbon and in output we need to be looking for. This is from Prosperity Without Growth by Tim Jackson. There's an awful lot of data summarised in this graphic here, because what it's telling you is how much carbon it costs you to produce $1 worth of output. That's what those bars represent. And so this data relates to 2007. So if you look at the bar right on the left there, it took 768 grams of carbon dioxide to produce $1 worth of output in the whole of the world in 2007. You can see that the UK was more efficient than that. It was 347 for us. That's because we've got better technology and so on. But the important point is the projections look on the right-hand side here, because that's looking ahead to 2050. And if you assume that the population will increase to 9 billion people, and if you make the assumption that everybody on the planet has an equal right to an equal standard of welfare, as I think is only moral, then you can see that the efficiency with which we have to produce $1 worth of output has to be 14 grams of carbon dioxide. So to move from the 768 to the 14 is the only way we're going to be able to carry on with this lifestyle on a global basis without totally destroying the planet. And I put it to you that is beyond the scope of engineering innovation, no matter how innovative our engineers are. So in other words, we have to look at what we expect from life in a different way. We have to stop expecting higher material standards and reassess what it is that we value about our lives. I also think it's important to note this relationship between equality and growth, because growth can be used as a substitute for equality. If somebody says, I haven't got as much as the Joneses next door, the answer to that can be, well, don't worry about that because you've got more than you had last year. And this is the way that politicians since the Second World War have sidelined this question of equality. It doesn't matter how much of the pie you get, because the pie is getting bigger for everybody. But that is impossible when you think about planetary limits. So this is another reason, if we turn that the other way around, it's a reason why desiring and building a sustainable economy will force that issue of equity more to the centre of the political agenda again. Okay, quick attack on George Osborne. I basically put this one here because eventually he'll come to the Economics Committee in Europe and I can do that in person. I just put that here because there was so little argument about this austerity. This is a tweet that I sent out, and what I said is, Krugman was saying that austerity is like hitting yourself with a baseball bat, and I said the problem is that the head and the hand belong to different people. And what amazed me was that Adam Posen, a member of the Monetary Policy Committee, and Linda Yu, who's the BBC business person, both retweeted that tweet, which said to me, there's so few people out there making this political case against austerity that, they feel they're going to retweet little humble me's tweet. So I just think this again demonstrates that we're not making these arguments strongly enough. There's not enough challenge. I've got to say that's partly because the Labour Party doesn't challenge strongly enough. I mean, from the Green point of view, of course, we tried to do this, but we're catastrophically taken out of the whole media discussion. So we're not hearing that actually public debt is increasing. You know, we're constantly hearing that the deficit is coming down, and there's a deliberate confusion, I think, between that debt and deficit. But here's what's really happening with the public debt. All that suffering, all those welfare cuts, all that nonsense of the bedroom tax, and still public debt is increasing and projected to increase right into the next government. 2 slides just to tell you that the huge increase in the public debt was not the consequence of Labour spending too much on hospitals, but actually the result of the financial crisis. This graph goes from February 2007 to December 2008, and it shows you that you can see when the crisis hit in the autumn of 2008, you can see public spending start to rocket upwards. Now I'm going to take you on to another graph. Just note the axis there, up 30 up to 80. Okay, so now we're going from December 2008 to February 2009. The axis has now gone up to 120, and public sector net borrowing, the amount the government has to borrow, has now gone well beyond, nearly up to 200 billion. So I'm just showing you that was a very sudden increase in the need to borrow, and it's entirely associated with the financial crisis and the bailing out of the banks. We mustn't buy this line that tells us it was Labour. I mean, I'm going to be nicer than that. But we mustn't buy the line that it was Labour spending too much investing. No, it wasn't about public investment. It was entirely about a financial crisis caused in the private sector. I haven't got time to tell you why quantitative easing just gives money to the rich. You can take my word for that. Andy Haldane, Bank of England, take his word for it. Another really important point is that this concentration we have on finance in the British economy is stopping us from making those investments in the sort of renewable transition that we need to see. So this is some work from the Wuppertal Institute in Germany. The UK is shown to be one of only 2 countries whose green economy actually shrank between 1999 and 2004. The other was Greece. While Finland's eco-industry grew by 54%, that of the UK shrank by 18%. So we're entirely missing the boat over the sustainability transition. I'm waiting for somebody to drag me away. Because we've got this obsession with finance in this country. 2 last things. Ownership matters is very important. Andy Cumbers is here. He knows a lot more about this than I do. But I want to say that if we're going to make that sustainability transition, the infrastructure of the future, the green infrastructure, needs to belong to all of us. This is a graph showing how wind power electricity generation massively increased in Denmark. It was partly a result of a good feed-in tariff, but it was also the result of the encouragement of community ownership. And the same thing is happening now, very impressively in Germany with their Energiewende. You can see a 10-fold increase in energy co-ops between 2001 and 2011, because the municipalities, the villages and the co-ops themselves own this energy infrastructure. There's a huge incentive to install more of it. And as you can tell, that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, so if you want to read any more, green economics kind of summarises what I think is a theory of how to move beyond the economic mess we're in, and the bioregional economy is a little bit more of a romantic version of the same thing. Thank you very much.